Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today at our session. I think quite cannily titled, The Show Must Go On, but not at any cost. As you know, we're here today to talk about mental well-being and where we are at as an industry. We talk a lot about well-being in productions, but actually we're here to take the temperature of what's actually going on in our industry and how we feel about it. I'm joined by a fantastic panel. All of the people on the panel today have shown a real sort of interest and commitment to our well-being and sort of taking the temperature of sort of mental health within our industry. So I'm going to hopefully we'll be having a candid and interesting conversation about where we're at, what we're doing well, what we might do better, and what my real aspiration for this session is that we will all leave this session thinking there are some things that we can do to improve the well-being of the people that we work with. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce everybody. Sitting to my right, Lara Singer, producer and coach. She will talk more about her coaching, it's fascinating, at Big Talk Productions. Next to Lara, Marcus Ryder, CEO of the film and TV charity. On my left, Leo Martin. Leo, you're head of production at Walk Films, producer most notably of Adolescence. Next to Leo, Kelly Webb-Lamb, CEO of Mothership, a BBC Studios company. And next to Kelly is Hamish. Hamish Fergusson, you are the creative director at Passion Pictures, and you're going to tell us a little bit about what it's like working in a company that where you work with very small production teams and some of the kind of challenges around the kind of feature doc content that you make. But I thought a good place to start today would be to ask all of the panellists about some early formative experiences in their career in television, good or bad, and really how that has impacted maybe the producers or the CEOs that they've become, and to give us some kind of insight into kind of maybe what the world used to be like. So Hamish, if that's all right, can I start with you?
Sure. Well, actually, I guess this wasn't super early in my career, but it was a kind of lesson in something we might end up talking about, which is kind of how people feel after the fact when things have or haven't gone well. So I just remember someone I worked with who, what I'd understood at the time to be in a relatively minor way on quite a big scale documentary series, was sort of rotated out of a certain role, basically because of a concern around contributors, which has for so long been a kind of priority perhaps over and above people worrying an equal amount about their own teams. And we met up years later, and I was just completely surprised that this person wanted to talk at length about this one moment that I hadn't registered as really significant for them. And it was just a kind of lesson in how if something's confusing or the sort of exit coffee kind of or equivalent doesn't happen, or people don't really understand why something had to be changed or didn't go well, the self-esteem hit can take years to process. And I think in the context of where we're at with the pressures on jobs, all of that gets more acute. So I was thinking about it, like I've been through lots of things as a freelancer and stuff, but that was a lesson in kind of helping manage people that was key, I think.
I like the idea of the exit coffee. I wonder how often it takes place, but maybe we can return to that. Thank you. Kelly, how about you? Early days telly.
So I was just looking around the room thinking most of you are a lot younger than me, but I was at the BBC during the BAFTA Bastards era. I don't know if there's anyone in the room that remembers that, but there was a time at the BBC it actually hit the Daily Mail, I think, when there became this thing about the BAFTA Bastards, and it kind of summed up the idea of people who win BAFTAs treating people badly and getting away with it. And that definitely, I was an AP at the time, really stayed with me just in thinking that's exactly what we don't want our industry to be, that there's some sense that because you're successful, you hold some power, you can get away with anything. And I definitely think that's not the case anymore at the BBC. So I think that has shifted, but yes, that stayed with me.
Thank you. We'll come on to talking about whether how things may or may not have changed. Leo, over to you.
I too worked through that. I didn't work with the BAFTA bastards, but I worked through a period where sort of stress and burnout was just the norm. Everyone kind of did it. And I actually did have a burnout, proper burnout, at the end of, I kind of forget now, 2018. And I took some time, I left the industry and took some time out. And then I came back, that's what happens, came back into a better place. Well, actually, I came back in COVID, but that's another story. Wasn't that much better. But then I joined Warp 2 years ago, and Warp hadn't produced for a while, and I came in to produce, to help produce Reunion and Adolescence, both really challenging shows. And I was given kind of, you know, full support of the company to do stuff around well-being, mental health, access. And I suddenly realised that looking at my own experiences made me just want to be better at it. And you know, I'm not brilliant at it. So, you know, if everyone thinks I am, I shouldn't be sitting here. There are things that we've got wrong, but I just want to keep doing it because of where I got to.
Yeah,
myself.
absolutely. And we might talk a bit about adolescence as well, and there's particular things that you put in place and how that worked so well. Marcus, early reflections on the industry.
Okay, so my problem is the reality is that I went straight from university into television, and so my understanding of what was normal was definitely not normal. My first job was on a magazine program, and the editor of that magazine program, you'd bring in your tape instead of them going to the edit for the viewing. You'd bring in your rough cut tape, and she would then watch it. And it was an open plan office, but she had a glass kind of panel office, and she would shout and tell you how bad it was, and that there's thousands of people lined up wanting to have the same job, and you're the worst possible director you could have seen. And if she really didn't like it, she would then go up to her open, the door of her glass office, and open it, and then shout, so that everybody in the open plan office would be sure to hear, but more, you could hear anyway, even when it was closed, but it was a show of power, of just absolute bullying and humiliation of the person. And next to her office was the deputy editor, and the running joke was that her box of Kleenex was the most useful thing in the entire office. All right? Now, I mentioned that story, it's horrific. I mentioned that story because coming in at 21, I thought this was normal. And I can go through, that's quite a horrific story, but I can go through the next 24 years of things which might not be as dramatic as that, but things which I absolutely thought was normal. And it's taken me leaving the UK, leaving British television, and that every now and again, even now, I am hit by moments where I'm like, that's terrible. And I thought that was normal. So we have to unlearn what normal is and what good working practice is. And even working in the charity which I'm working in now, I'm still going through that process. And I think we all, as an industry, have to go through that process.
Wow. Thanks, Marcus. Lara, early experiences.
What you just said really resonates with me, and I shared a very similar experience early on in my career. Just thinking that the way people led was normal in a very dominating way, in a way that shouted at you. I had the opposite from you, funnily enough. I had someone close the door and then shout and swear at me, so no one else really knew, and I just thought that that's what you did when you were under high pressure and how you led. And I just thought probably exhaustion is just part of the job. And I've really come to learn that burnout doesn't have to be inevitable. And both as a producer and a well-being coach, I've seen the significant cost that comes from ignoring well-being and the need to really change the way we work from a fundamental level, so that a really deep mindset shift happens around burnout, and it's no longer just a badge of honor which I really think it used to be and still is. Oh yeah, I'm working long hours. Look at me, I'm brilliant at my job. But it's actually a warning signal, and it's not a badge of honour, and I think that's what we're here to discuss.
Yeah, thank you. Brilliant anecdotes for setting the scene. I think our stories will get better, I hope. But actually, importantly, at the Film and TV charity since 2019, you've been not just capturing the anecdote, but measuring and taking the temperature. Can you talk us through the kind of inception of the Looking Glass survey, why it came about in 2019 and what it's teaching us still today?
Okay, so I've only been with the charity for the last 2 years, so I wasn't there when it started. But I think that my predecessor, Alex, it was a genius move in 2019 to do the survey, because it was born out of, from my understanding, the Me Too movement and the understanding of sexual harassment and what was bubbling up. And instead of only just thinking of it as Me Too, she realised that there was a broader context of the entire working environment. And so that was looking at the whole mental health of it. So to put Me Too into a broader context and then get, those figures, which we've been able to do every 2 years, and it's the largest survey of its kind of film and television, my understanding is across the world, was an absolutely brilliant move on her part and has proved invaluable. We're contacted by America, New Zealand, Australia, the Netherlands, etc., wanting to know how to work on ASDATs. We are the envy, and I'm not just saying that with regards to the charity, but ironically, Britain is the envy of actually looking at this subject. The fact that we're holding this panel now is something which other countries really aren't doing. So it's great that we're looking at it.
And your sort of your data set is approximately 4,000 respondents to the survey. Can you sort of characterise for us what those 4,000 people? The last time you did this survey was last year.
Mm-hmm.
What are they telling us? What are those individuals who respond to the survey telling us?
They're telling us that the anecdotes that you've just heard are definitely not the exception. They are the rule. Last survey is saying that 41% of people have experienced bullying, harassment or discrimination of some nature. What's really worrying as well is that in terms of reporting it, the majority feel that they don't report it, and the people that do report it, the majority of the people who do report it then feel that things either didn't improve or worse yet, actually got worse. Right? And so with regards to the anecdotes about bullying, there's a serious problem with regards to bullying, and I'm sure we might talk about attempts to address that in the industry, whether that's CISA or otherwise. But the other stat, which is, I'll give you 3 real quick stats.
Yeah.
12%, only 12% of people working in the industry think it's a mentally healthy place to work. That's in general. If you then start looking at other characteristics with regards to disability, race, carers, it's lower than 12%. So and it's bumped around that number for the forever, since 2019. 35% of the industry have experienced a self-reported serious mental health condition in the last 12 months. And trigger warning, but I assume that everyone who's come here knowing that we're going to talk about mental health are expecting us talking about difficult subjects. 30% of people in the last 12 months have had suicidal ideations. Right? That's compared with the general population who are asked exactly the same question. So we make sure the question is the same as is asked of the general population, general working population. That's 6%. So it's not, because some people often ask me that, saying 30%, that sounds far too high. Maybe everybody is having suicidal ideations or just having intrusive thoughts. No, they're not. Our industry, something is really rotten with it if you compare it to other industries and compare it to the working population of Britain as a whole.
Marcus, what would you say to people who might come back at you and say, we hear you, and clearly the results of those you've gathered from those 4,000 people are hugely relevant to those 4,000 people. But perhaps one of the criticisms of the survey might be that actually those people who go to fill that survey in are people who are struggling with poor mental health.
So that's why it's great that we've got the 4,000. That's why we need a large data set. And then if you map what we know of people, of the general demographic of people working in the industry against the demographic of people who have filled it out, it maps very, very closely. The only thing which it doesn't map that closely to is that we skew slightly higher with regards to women, right? But if we were thinking that we're just going to be getting people who are only affected, we would expect the data set to skew with one part of the industry as opposed to another, that the age demographic, it might be one age different compared to the other. And we have a research team. It's, to be honest with you, when I first started at the charity, I thought it was a bit of a luxury having 3 people dedicated to our data, but it's absolutely essential. And these people, I worked at Birmingham University. These people are fantastic. And so they make sure that we don't have a skewed data set,
right,
precisely because of that. So thanks for asking the question,
yeah,
and I'm glad I can reassure people that unfortunately it is not a skewed data set. This is just I am sure if you threw out the question about the anecdotes, asking people anecdotes about mental health, they will all, the vast majority of people here, will be able to give you similar anecdotes.
Yeah, good. I mean, incontrovertible data that can't be ignored.
Yeah.
All of you are here because you've taken a big, strong personal interest, professional interest in this area, and you're all senior leaders, and you're all trying to make a difference in the way that you operate and in the way that you run your productions, your production companies. It'd be really great to hear from all of you about something specific that you're doing at the moment, or an approach that you're taking that you hope or you can demonstrate is making a difference. Kelly, will you kick us off with how you approach the production you're currently in production with for Channel 4 and what steps you've taken?
Sure. So we're a very small company, and we're in production with a big show. And it is, as Hilary said, has always been really important to me that I want Mothership to be a good place to work, and I want the people who come to work with us to go away having had a good time. I also want to have a good time. So before we started in production, we had a conversation internally about what we wanted to do everything we could to make that be the case. And I mean, the first thing the stories that we've just been talking about, I mean, the first thing, this is a bigger question, I guess, is about culture. And I think a very sort of straightforward position of just don't be a dick, right? Just make sure as much as you possibly can that the people in senior positions are aligned with you in terms of how you want your team to be run, what you want the culture of your team to be. That doesn't cost anything. We then did something which everybody can do, which is called up the Film and TV charity, who have an incredible free resource called the Whole Picture Toolkit, and really use that resource and use the people at the Film and TV charity to help us to put things in place for our team. So we went being from a team of, I'm going to make this up, but probably 10 in the office to about 60. So really big expansion. And there are a few really simple things. And I think the thing that's brilliant about the Whole Picture Toolkit is you can pick and choose the things that are relevant, the resources, it's a whole load of resources that are relevant to you. The thing for me, I would say, that I found most transformation on it so small. We did lots of other things. We had a mental health kick-off meeting. We worked with a wellbeing consultant. We had a mental health risk assessment across the whole show. We did lots of things to kind of make sure that all the way through the process we were assessing where the pinch points were. But the one thing that felt to me really powerful was, and this is again from the charity, there's a form, you may all know about it, it's called the Working Well With Me form, and it's a very simple, we kind of took it and adapted it to us, but a very simple set of questions, 10 questions, that are just about who you are, how you work your best, what things are difficult for you, anything you'd like, in this case, me to know about your life, things that we might look out for, that might be signs that things were hard, just a set of questions. And those questions are absolutely optional, and I think this is really important because I think some people love this stuff and some people are like, really go away, I'm not on my first day going to pour my heart out to you, and that's really important. But I, again, taking the lead from the charity, filled out that form myself, and I share it with everyone who arrives through the door. So the first thing that happens is I say, this is me. And I've been very vulnerable on that form. So I've really shared things that are hard for me, things that have gone on in my life, what I find easy and difficult, how I stay sane, etc. And it's been interesting because not everybody fills it in. And as I said, that's fine. But I would say we got maybe a third of people shared those forms. And then once the forms come back, it enabled us to have a conversation about what they'd shared, who else they would want to share that with, whether there were particular things, if they had raised protected characteristics, what we would do to make reasonable adjustments, but just started a conversation that then opens the door. And I think that's the really powerful thing about that form, is that, first of all, if you, as the most senior person in the company, are sharing your own vulnerability, that's really powerful in itself. But you begin by opening the door, and that's the way I think that you get through really crazy, intense periods, is by everybody knowing that the door is open and that you're going to be receptive to them coming to speak to you. I should cut now.
Kelly, I know, just quickly, because we've got a lot to get through. I know that you're midway through production. You're not at the end of it with that
I'm
nice long view. You're in the edit. You haven't got that nice long view and that warm feeling of this is what we did, and you can assess it. Do you think it's made a difference?
I think it made a massive difference. I mean, we're through the shoot and into the edit, and we're not in the really sticky bit of the edit yet, so we're early in the edit. But certainly through the shoot, I wouldn't say just that form, but the whole process really made a difference. And I mean, I feel very confident that it was difficult, at times long, and, you know, but all new shows have difficult shoots, but a very, people felt good at the end.
And just very quickly, cost neutral?
The
process of that is a cost neutral process.
Was free.
It's just, okay, it's just something you fill in.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Leo, talk us through Adolescence, the stuff you put in place, very particular show. The principal is 13, the actor was 13?
Yes.
So obviously you're dealing with minors, and obviously Jack Thorne, TAP, you know, you've got a lot of things in your favour for creating an environment where these things will be front of mind. How did it go on that show?
Well, very early on, it was Netflix we talked very clearly about what the expectation. So the things that we did, which aren't just specific to adolescents, they're specific to, they run across both our shows. Access coordinators. I should point out both our shows are dramas, and both had ring-fenced money in the budget for a lot of these resources, but we also had some resources that were cost neutral, some things that were cost neutral. So we had access coordinators on both shows, pretty much like Work Well With Me. We'll go through everyone's needs. We had Solus Mind supported us. So those were counselling sessions that were available to all cast and all crew. Those were really clearly signposted to everybody all the way through the process. In terms of, as a company, we set out very clearly from day one what we expect in terms of behaviour and what we won't tolerate, and pretty much our company motto is don't be a dick. So, and Mark Herbert has gone on record and said it several times. So it genuinely is our unofficial motto. And so we set out our stall really early. We are very present on our show, so I am on set very regularly. I make sure that people know where they can come when stuff goes wrong, because inevitably it does. Around the children, and we had a full-time child psychologist who worked with all the minor cast on Adolescence, and would check in with the producer at the end of every day. What else did we do?
That's quite a lot.
Well, we also had a fantastic, I've got a name checker, Carrie Burbage, our fantastic production manager, who she instigated Wellbeing Wednesdays. And on a Wednesday, there would be things like the wellness walk. So crew in the lunch break might go off on a walk. And actually, it was quite an intense process. And this just made departments integrate. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you will know that it's quite, everyone goes off into their corner at lunchtime. And so that kind of really worked. Treats, we did weekly treats just to make people, just to make, you know, they don't have to cost a lot of money. It can be like a pack of Haribo, but it's just a thing that just, you know, it's a thought and it makes people feel appreciated. Easter eggs. I mean, these are sort of, I mean, they're not as, you know, Soulless Mind was the big thing, right? I think.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sorry.
No, that's really, I think that's really interesting. I'm so keen for people to be able to take away some good ideas at the very least. Hamish, you make feature docs, you work in very small teams, you don't, you know, if you've got a big team and a gallery or you've got a big crew, some rules apply. Talk to me about how you manage that kind of voracious appetite that small teams often have about working. Everybody wants to work to the best of their ability, but there is no sort of stop moment. How do you prevent people just from working and working and working?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, so we make TV and feature films, but quite a few single films and small documentary series. And, you know, sometimes that's, at its smallest, it can be 2 people in a hire car heading off to film something. So the sort of responsibility and challenge is getting enough visibility and setting a kind of cultural weather system for those productions as an indie that informs how everyone behaves to each other. I think it comes with huge pros because people at a really early stage of their career often get loads of responsibility, personal ambition and ambition for the project is given plenty of room, but clearly that's also where risk can attach. So, I mean, in terms of things that we do, I think we in sort of the more sensitive end of docs, there's a kind of very long heritage of being very concerned about contributors. And, you know, in the baddest of bad old days, even that went missing. But we inherently are often working with clinical psychologists. So companies like Safe Haven, Exception Group, DART, Mindzone. And I guess in the last 5-10 years, we hit like a mid-step where we said, well, obviously those resources should also be available to our teams. Talk to our psychologists at any time because you're being exposed to other people's trauma or traumatic content, but also just generally. And I think we're now in an even healthier place where we have kind of kick-off meetings where you talk about everyone's vulnerabilities and read the kind of content you're processing, but also each other at the beginning, rather than let's have a safety net in case things go wrong.
So you're explicit in the way you manage a show and the conversations you have at the beginning.
And you sort of you kind of have sessions that are about this often, you know, the dark end of docs, tragic event, and how that might be difficult for us. But inherently, I think you open a space where people share with each other. And
have you seen a culture shift in terms of the people, your colleagues, feeling, I mean, Kelly talked about, you know, some of her colleagues' appetite to share and others feeling...
Yeah, I'd say it of myself, like definitely.
Yeah.
But I think the flip side of all that is that you have very bonded teams, which is good, but I think that sort of corner of the industry sustains itself through amazing collaborations, and frankly, it's the best thing about the job. It's the people you work with and how much time you spend in the sort of trenches, as it were. But if you're outside of that, and we're seeing under the job pressure like a diversification of the industry, if you don't feel part of the clan or the club, it can be the opposite of sustaining. So I think relying on great friendships and relying on people to kind of have fun together and bond isn't enough. You have to sort of have oversight.
Yeah.
And so the kick-offs are part of that. I think making sure at the end of a project people have really had a chance to chat about what did or didn't go well and feel like their reputation is not at stake just because of the vagaries of any given film.
Yeah.
Which, of course, let's face it, documentaries change shape.
Yeah.
Some go well, some don't.
Yeah.
Is really key. So I guess we try and top and tail more than we used to try and sort of safeguard how atomised it all is.
Great, thank you. Lara, big talk. What I know you are evangelical about this stuff. On our Zooms, I've been very taken by what you do and what you talk about. Can you just, in brief, just tell us what the mindset is and what you're trying to put in place on all of the shows that you work on across as a producer at Big Talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's about shifting the mindset from not just being about, okay, burnout's an issue, how can we deal with it in the short term? How can we firefight these problems? And shifting more into how can we create transformational change in the way that we work so that our priorities aren't just about the shows we're working on, it's on the way we're working. So with Big Talk on transaction, we created a mindful space so that people had permission to pause at lunch and had an understanding of well-being so that they could infuse that with their day-to-day and help them. But also looking at working with different organisations and networks. I work with National Film and Television School. I've designed a well-being and support programme for them, for people who are going through difficult times, equipping them with knowledge of psychology tools, of positive psychology, so that they can boost resilience or perhaps strengthen their motivation if they're feeling really stuck and lost, and how to find purpose again in their work. And the North East Screen are also doing a brilliant job in investing in our future leaders. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is great practical steps on production, but also bringing in a deeper cultural change. And how can we invest in our future leaders? North East Screen are doing sessions for emerging directors and helping them learn how to lead with confidence. And we've spoken about these kinds of roles of leadership where people are really dominant and bullying and shouting, and perhaps they've been under high pressure themselves. And equipping people with skills so that they really understand how to lead, how to support people, how to hold space for people who are under high pressure. So both working with, those production, practical things that we can do, and also working with organisations looking after the future of our industry.
And on a specific production, is there a sort of key moment when you gather that production team together and you're at the start of, the difficult journey, where you sort of clearly state the intention and your cultural sort of requirements, if you like, of behaviour? Do you have that moment?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because how often with the people that we work with do we ask, what are your values? How can we work together in a way that's going to be really great for you? And what do you not like? What have you done in the past that really doesn't work for you? And having those conversations early, having conversations about well-being early, I've been bringing in that with any kind of groups of people I work with so that they understand, hang on a minute, this is a priority. And it's not something that is just, oh God, no, I don't want to talk about it. And almost every time I work on a production, there's people who are just pushing on because they're ill, but they're pushing on. And it's being quite open and saying, we don't need to prove anything. We care about you. And this is a human space, not just a space that's going to create a show that's going to be run by money, hence the title. It's going to be run by humans. So how can we support you?
Thank you. Marcus, you don't work in production anymore. I'm slightly thinking, thank God, given the appalling experiences that you had at the beginning of your career. A lot of us were nodding. Some of us I spotted nodding. Yeah, that one. Where does responsibility lie for this? Does responsibility ultimately lie with the broadcasters who commission these shows and pay for them? And what's our responsibility? Or does the responsibility lie with the producers, with the Kellys and the other people who run production companies?
That's a really good question. I think responsibility, obviously, the get-out answer is the responsibility lies with all of us.
Yeah.
All right? What we need
I was expecting you to say that.
Yeah. And if you want to donate to the charity, I'm not blaming
I
anybody.
was not expecting you to say that. Maybe that's kind of inevitable.
But I think once we take the bland answer of responsibility lies with all of us, we then need to look at what are the pinch points, because we've got so many good intentions. What are the pinch points which is stopping this from working? And so we here, for example, we talk to commissioners and commissioning bodies, and we speak to the MDs of the production companies.
Yeah.
And there is something going on with regards to
What are they telling you?
whether that communication is happening as well as it should. You know, we speak to MDs who are sometimes the stress is massive, but their relationship, and they're trying to produce programs to a budget which they just can't deliver that program to. But they don't feel they have the relationship with the commissioning bodies to ask for more money and to be, especially in the current climate, and so they are taking on that stress themselves. Similarly, we talk to commissioning bodies, and they're saying, we are having really open conversations and we want to know, you know, and so the commissioning bodies will say, well, the problem is often with the independent companies not telling us what resources we really need and what have you. So I don't think it's as simple as to say it's the commissioners at fault. It's the, you know, as my couples therapist would say, it's about good communication. But there's a power dynamic in that good communication, and we need to recognise that power dynamic. And sometimes that's where the charity comes in, and where what we want to be able to do. And this is going to leap to something which we said that we're going to talk about later, is the charity is working with almost every commissioning body and manager and all the large production companies to have mentally healthy standards, a pan-industry set of mentally healthy standards. And one of the things, and we'll talk about that I'm sure in later detail, but one of the things is having a shared language. And so if we have a shared language of what is expected, what good looks like, then we can actually have good communication. And so we need to find ways in which commissioners can have that good communication. If there are extra resources, if we need wellbeing facilitators, being able to have that good communication. If it is cost neutral, being able to recognise that. So, yeah, to go back to the bland answer, it is on everybody, but there is a power dynamic which can get in the way of that good communication.
I guess
but I see Kelly wants to...
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think ultimately that responsibility lies with the producer.
Yeah.
We are hiring the people. It is our company. It is our culture. It is our show. So I don't think we as producers should be shying away from that. I think what Mark is saying is true, that communication is what's at the heart of it, because we've talked about bullying and we've talked about the things that we can all do to change the culture, but we all know that a lot of the stress in our industry is about money, right? So it's about lengths of schedules, lengths of days, the way that people work. And I think it's about communication between the producer and the broadcaster. Certainly on the show that we just did, we did have a direct conversation about that, and the channel were unbelievably supportive. I think that producers, particularly in this climate where there isn't much work, can be worried about raising things that might cost a bit more, or about raising things where they don't want to be seen to be difficult. And I think we need to change that so that it is an expected conversation at the point of commission, so that, like diversity or the climate or other things, are expected conversations that you have. You're not having to kind of have something that feels like perhaps an uncomfortable conversation, because it's just part of the conversation that you have it's an open conversation. But I think the producer does need to take responsibility for saying if there is a problem, and having the courage to do that. I would love us to get to a place where the broadcasters also says, on those early stages, what does your schedule look like? What can we do? So that we're all, that conversation, if you start completely joined up, you then continue completely joined up.
Yeah.
I don't think we're quite there yet as an industry, but it feels to me that communication is the way to solve this. Not that that's suddenly going to make money appear out of nowhere, but the reality is that if to ensure people's welfare is going to cost a bit more money, then if you have the conversation at the beginning, you can decide together what you will do. I mean, maybe the project isn't viable. That's a conversation we all need to be prepared to have. But what you can do to take money out of other pots to look after that. So I think it's about taking the heat out of it as a conversation so that we're just having the conversation. It's just the normal thing that you do. And then that means that you don't get into pinch points later, which I think is the thing at the moment, is things come out later.
It's also setting... The working well with me form is great for an individual. But what you've just said, Kelly, with regards to making sure that those conversations happen at the point of commissioning or within the commissioning process, I think is vital. And I would say it's almost like a producing well with me form, you know? So one of the things when we're talking to MDs and is the fact that they will send an email off to a commissioner and they will get, you know, one-word answers back, you know, of just, or very brief, or even if they might not get a response, you know, and that can be really hard. You know, and to speak to Hamish's point, I think there has been a progression. I think that we recognise that we need to look after the mental health of contributors. It then went to, we recognise we need to look after the mental health of staff, of our employees. But the point where I don't think we've quite reached yet, right, and the irony of this is mad, is that we don't realise we need to look after the mental health of our leaders. You know, so as I said, we talk to commissioners, we speak to MDs, and they keep talking about the mental health of the people that they employ, that they look after. And they invariably, we have to remind them that you have to look after their mental health. So while I absolutely agree with you, Kelly, I think part of it is that to take that responsibility, sometimes those heads of production and what have you aren't looking after their own mental health. So we have to look after ourselves as well.
I'm just going to hold that thought. I've been a very negligent host. What I meant to say 35 minutes ago was, if you've got any questions, submit them via the app. Get tapping. I would be happy for you to shout the questions out. I'm not sure if the Edinburgh Festival allow that, but hopefully you'll submit some questions. It's a really interesting point. I mean, I think, you know, as a broadcaster, I'm the only person on this panel as a broadcaster. I know other people have worked in broadcasting over the years. It's you know, the point at which your production, there is maximum optimism about your production, and our shared endeavour is on day one. Day one, everything is possible and potentially is going to be fantastic and transformative, and we're all holding hands and we're hoping to collaborate on something that's going to be special and consequential. I feel very strongly as a broadcaster that is the moment to have that conversation. It has to be baked into the budget, what we think the needs of the production is going to be and how we meet those needs. I don't think everything costs money, and I'll maybe come back to that in a minute, but I think, and in fact, I think actually most things don't cost money because culture comes for free and we set the tone. That's just human behaviour. We can come back to that, but I do think having that conversation early days about the type of show you're making, the rigours of the schedule, the content, the numbers of contributor, the types of contributor, the stories we're telling, all of that, or you know, the dramas we're creating, the age, the size, the scale of the cast, the type of story, you know, is it a sort of cosy crime? Is it something that's very dark and very difficult for actors to process while they're actually on location? All of those things need to be talked about. And I think just picking up on your point, you know, nobody bats an eyelid in fact, it's everybody's expectation now that your shows, our shows, will be Albert certified. Now, actually, we were the first broadcaster to do that, but actually, that's something that's become absolutely mainstream. And nobody goes, what do you mean we're going to try and be a carbon neutral production? No one is saying that. If they are, please let me know. I haven't heard anyone say that. Certainly not to my face. So these are the kinds of things that, you know, this needs to become routine. And I think the word expectation, you know, expectations are really, really important. And I think having that honest conversation with broadcasters around what you can reasonably and cheerfully expect on this budget and what we will reasonably and cheerfully deliver for you on this budget. And actually, we all go above and beyond. And actually, I don't think you're saying, or any of us are saying, that this requires people to be unionised down tools and not go above and beyond, because I think that's part of the pleasure. And I think we talked about that in one of our research calls. You said, you know, the problem with small production, it's not a problem, but the behaviour of small production teams is they want to keep going.
Well, I think also whatever scale, I think you can have a great culture, and that means you don't have to have necessarily huge amounts of money, but you can also have all the money in the world.
Yeah.
And if the culture's not right,
yeah.
I think productions, whatever scale they're at, they're like goldfish. They sort of grow to the size of the bowl they're put in. So if you get more money, you get more on screen, because that's what we all get out of bed for.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it makes you work any less hard, though.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think so I think you have to have a culture that allows failure. You have to have a culture that kind of doesn't insist that everybody, you know, breaks themselves.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, even if you have extra resource,
it's not going to go to that place. Thank you, everyone, for putting questions. I will now put my glasses on and try and read them. Much of the focus is on contributors and cast in sensitive productions. How can we better protect crew, particularly junior staff or freelancers, who may not feel empowered to speak up? I mean, I wonder whether you might talk about that, and culture.
Yeah, I think...
How do you empower junior people? I think about that a lot. What are your fixes for that?
And I think Marcus spoke a little bit about leadership, but also looking at how we invest in our future leaders. And so often people rise up and they're suddenly an HOD, but they've not actually really learned how to hold space for people and how to lead. And they might have done a 2-hour workshop on it, and then they're good to go. And right, okay, I'm under horrendous amounts of pressure, and I've suddenly got to lead a team. And that also then trickles down, and as we've discussed, can be the root of a problem. So it's about, I think, talking to and calling out to organisations, and the ones I've spoken of are doing great work, but more needs to be done on really equipping people with skills and knowledge. How many people know about how to use positive psychology and strength spot? It's really equipping people with knowledge, so that they can then feel confident. And a lot of, from my experience, a lot of kind of people jumping up and leading teams want to do the best they possibly can, but are really lacking in self-confidence. And then that comes out because they're feeling insecure and they don't really know how to handle things, and it all goes to shit. So I think really looking at how do we help self-confidence and coaching support and trainings, and looking at how we can help uplift the future of our industry, to speak to that. Does that answer?
Yeah, well, I hope so. Thank you. Leo, there's a question here for you. Looking back, is there anything you do differently in terms of wellbeing support in adolescence, or anything you wish had been available that wasn't? I mean, I know you had a very positive experience.
Well, it was very positive. I mean, one of the things I was going to say is that people talk about long working hours, and on, nearly got the show wrong, on Adolescence, because we had a 13-year-old at the heart of the show, and we did, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a single take, so we did a take in the morning, we did a take in the afternoon. It made for a short day, and I think, and the sun was shining, and I think all of those, I mean, that isn't in everyone's control, I understand that, or everyone's budget, but I think it just, that was one thing that, not that I'd do differently, but it actually made me think, my God, the working hours are, you know, the root of a lot of this. So I just want to come back to the junior members of staff. I think one of the things about that is being present and checking in. And we didn't have a kind of formal buddying up, but people did buddy up and make sure that people were okay on our adolescence. There was also a lot of stuff going on in the world at the same time. This Stockport incident. So, you know, there was a lot to kind of deal with, and so we had a lot of kind of checking in and making sure people were okay.
We've had a few questions around junior members of the team, which I think is really interesting. Do any of you have any sort of tips about how you might manage and help to sort of support particularly junior members of the team who feel less empowered and less likely to kind of reach out and state their demands? Kelly?
I mean, again, I think it's important to, first of all, it's about culture, but secondly, it's about intention. So again, we're a small company, so this is much easier for me to do, and I'm not suggesting everyone can do this, but I personally made sure that I sat down with everybody who joined on their first day and talked to them, introduced myself, told them a bit about Mothership, kind of started a conversation with them to try to just take the heat out of hierarchy and kind of be an open company. And so many people said to me, I cannot, like no company I've ever worked at has ever the CEO sat down with me. So I think little things like that, but I completely appreciate, much easier for me to do. But then I think it's about being intentional. So with our runners, it's about making sure that they know who their person is, that they're really clear about that, about the lines of communication, who they speak to, if there's a problem, and we understand how that is then fed up. And that we're, from the beginning, from their very first day, really clear with them about expectations and what they do if they're worried about anything. But I also think it's about working hours, and certainly with junior members of the team and with runners, I just think they need to be on shorter working hours than everyone else, because I think we need to protect people who've just started in their first jobs. And that is about the way that you schedule and the way that you manage your, I mean, I'm talking about shoot, so that we did do that. So our runners were on shorter days, and that is, I think, the norm, should be the norm. But again, it's just, I think it's all about beginning in an intentional way, really thinking this through. So yeah, open door and thinking about what you can do to be concrete about how you work.
Hamish, do you have any tips on junior members of the team?
I really hope we're in a world now where you're very unlikely to have someone put their fingers in their ears at any level above you if you want to talk to them, and that's easily said and harder to do, but I do think it's true. So I'd sort of reassure people that you will by and large get good reactions. I think the other thing, obvious, but the worklessness crisis is sort of a pandemic of insecurity, and it goes, as people have been saying, right up the chain. So you have execs worrying about mortgages and all the rest of it, and I think to look after the freshest people in our industry, you have to take the heat out of. It's like one of those corporate toys where the ball bearing swings at one end, pressure gets passed on, and at the other end it has a really, really profound effect. And I think to look after the people at the bottom, you have to be looking after everyone and telling people it's okay. Can I just say something which might be a little bit controversial, and I think speaks to that Newton's cradle analogy. I think that a lot of leaders are suffering from untreated trauma, and they take it out on their junior staff because, like myself, they say, this is what I had to go through when I was 21, this is what I had to go through when I was 22, and they then transfer that onto the runner and what have you. So I do think that while it's really important that we do look at all of our staff and our teams, we need to treat our trauma, because if we don't, we will put that onto our junior staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. I'm conscious that we've only got 5 more minutes, and I want us all to come. I want you to come away with some tips. I want us all the panel to all give a tip about something they think we could do to improve things immediately. But I do want to give a shout out actually to Screen Skills. Someone has asked a question. Someone has said Screen Skills has a good working practices training and is promoting leadership and management training. They've asked about other training. I don't think we've got time to cover it, but I do want to make the point that, you know, Screen Skills, obviously it's a fantastic organisation with a lot on offer, and any of you, whatever position you're in, should be going there and looking at what they offer and thinking about how you can improve both your own work, but also that if you're in a management position, the lives of other. Because we've only got 5 more minutes, I think it would be really useful for us to kind of think about practical tools and tips and the future we want. I know you're going to talk about standards and your dream of implementation. We get to a world where this stuff feels as embedded in as our kind of BAFTA Albert type stuff. But actually, for you, what's the one really practical tip that you can give to the room about how to be on a production, the thing that you could probably do tomorrow that will make a difference?
Prioritise well-being and really look at how you see it and look at shifting your mindset around it on a deep level. And I have thoughts about where I want the industry to go in a few years, but we'll come back to that.
Maybe we'll come back to that as a wrap-up thought. A practical tip?
I would say a really good starting point, if you don't know where to start, is the Whole Pictures Toolkit. It will give you all the pointers and places, you know, things that you can think about, and it's free.
Yeah, free we like. Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. There are amazing free resources out there. The Whole Picture Toolkit, I agree about Screen Skills. We used lots of free Screen Skills training. It's amazing what you can get. Yeah. So I think it is about being clear with your team about what your intentions are, and then doing what you can within the resources that you have to get there.
Perspective, really. I mean, like, sacrilege to say at a TV festival, but it is only television, so like mutter it under your breath once a day. Nothing is more important than people's actual life experiences in making all the wonderful things we make, and it's easy to forget that. So just step back from it as often as you can.
I like to say, get over it. We're not surgeons.
Yeah, we're not, exactly.
Saving lives, we are making telly.
Exactly.
Fun and exciting and sometimes consequential as it can be. I had quite a few conversations off the record with a lot of CEOs across the industry, scripted and unscripted. And actually some of the things that they reminded me of were really important, and they're really small things. A CEO from a fantastically successful fated company says, I try and be the first person to leave the office every day, because that is such a good and important and vital message. When I walk out the door, I'm saying something very meaningful about what I think the day should look like, and everybody should follow me. So follow the leader, be the leader that does that. And someone else reminded me that in France, I think it's illegal to send, or not illegal, it's probably not illegal, but to send emails out of hours. And I think implementing a culture where either nobody should respond to emails out of hours, and therefore nobody should send them out of hours. A crisis is a crisis. There is a telephone for a reason. You can speak to people, you can WhatsApp people. I think that's a brilliant one too. And then I think, you know, you've talked about the sort of those small treats. Something I do actually, completely not related to this, is in our team meetings, I'll often get some of the most junior people in my team to lead those meetings, not all the time, but sometimes. And it's quite interesting when that happens, and it just, the kind of whole perspective of the meeting can shift. Right, we've got literally 2 minutes. Where do we need to get to? What does good look like in 3 years' time?
Okay, I was going to talk about the fact that the charity is working on pan-industry mentally healthy standards. We've been working with all the broadcasters, all the major production companies, all the major stakeholders to roll this out, and we hope that in the next couple of months we'll be able to announce pan-industry standards which broadcasters and production companies can sign up to and adhere to, which I think would make a massive difference. I was going to talk about that. What I will talk about is the fact that, and what we haven't talked about, is freelancers.
Yeah,
and
very true.
The shift to a freelance workforce has had massive effects on people's mental health. And the largest driver of poor mental health is loneliness, and that comes out in all our surveys. And so if I'm looking for one tip of how to address it, don't just think about your production, but think about the fact that your workforce is going from one production company to another production company. They will have gaps. How do we look at loneliness
And support
and support that, build communities? And so we really have to look at that. And there are ways. We have empty office space at the Film and TV charity, so we invite and have free hot desking, so to build community. I walk into Pacific Quay in Glasgow, and it is like the Mary Celeste. They could definitely look at free hot desking at Pacific Quay. Don't know if anyone's here at BBC Scotland.
Not sure if that's in any of our power.
Right, not in any of our power, but I'm just saying that we go around and we can build community. And so don't just think about your production, think about how we build community and how we address loneliness, because there's a real problem with an atomized freelance workforce, and we have to think about their careers holistically, not just for the 3 months or 6 months that they're on our production.
Thank you so much, Marcus. We have absolutely run out of time. I'm a minute over. I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody on the panel, for joining us. Can you...